Hello and welcome. You're watching TVP World and I'm your host, Klaudia Czerwińska. Alexander Lukashenko is seeking a re-election in elections widely seen as rigged, with opposition members unable to take part. Thousands of oppositionists are currently in prison. To discuss this, I am joined by the leader of the Belarusian opposition in exile, Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya. Thank you so much for joining me here in the program and in our studio.
Thank you.
So we are looking at another rigged election next month. What is your message to Belarusians and, most importantly, to the international community?
First of all, I'm glad that people all over the world, our democratic partners, understand that this farce that's going to happen in Belarus has nothing in common with elections. This is reminds more military operation rather than elections. It will be like reappointment of Lukashenko by Lukashenko. And of course, we don't have to explain anything to Belarusians because, you know, in 2020, Lukashenko lost legitimacy and people didn't allow to turn the page of our history, and they will not recognize him as legitimate, you know, person. The same about our democratic partners. Conduct the policy of non-recognition of Lukashenko, because people are not choosing him. You know, he doesn't fulfill the will of Belarusian nation. So just continue this, be consistent, continue this policy of delegitimization. Don't send ambassadors to Minsk, cooperate with democratic forces of Belarus. And this is our main message. But actually, you know, honestly speaking, we don't even have to explain it to our partners because there is, you know, consensus in democratic society. You know, they see everything that's happening in the country, that no space, you know, for free and honest elections. And this is actually free and honest elections. This is actually what we want to conduct in Belarus.
Before you drew a parallel between Lukashenko and other dictators, like, for example, Syria's Bashar al-Assad, what lessons do you think can be learned from the downfall of such dictatorships and authoritarian regimes?
You know, the story is the same. Usually dictatorships look very strong and monolith until they suddenly collapse. You know, I just can recall Ceausescu, for example, when one evening, you know, he collected thousands of people in front of his palace.
He felt empowered.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the same thing about nowadays dictators. Now they look invincible, but tomorrow, you know, they are defeated. And that's why society, you know, has to be prepared, you know, to take power, you know, to dismantle this regime. And one more lesson is that allies of dictators, the same dictators that, you know, usually backing up them, sometimes they will not come and rescue, you know, the smaller dictators. So I think
it's interesting how those dynamics play out in the political world, isn't it?
Absolutely. And this sends like clear signals to democratic world, powerful world, actually, that we have to stay strong, you know, in our values and our demands to dictators, that, you know, good should prevail in this world.
Show a weakness. So what role do you think that the EU, the US, the democratic nations of the world should play in supporting Belarusian opposition? Are there any specific tools that so far might have been underutilized in order to be able to help the democratic opposition in Belarus?
You know, first of all, I really don't like when our democratic movement, our democratic forces are called opposition, because in democratic countries, you know, it's usually normally to have a position, and people sometimes are confused. You know, in our case, you know, we want the world, you know, to conduct consistent policy regarding Belarus, create as much pressure as possible on Lukashenko's regime to isolate or weaken him politically, economically, you know, to impose sanctions, individual, sectoral sanctions, to weaken his pockets. But on the other hand, you know, we have to balance it with support to Belarusian people. For 4 years of constant repressions in Belarus, Belarusian people are not giving up. We still continue to fight. In Belarus, undergroundly, outside, you know, in exile, people can be more active. So we need support to our media to confront this propagandistic machine. We need support to our human rights defenders who actually have to defend thousands of political prisoners in Belarus.
After all, this fight is for the people.
Absolutely.
It's for them to have a democratic, free country.
Yeah, So our fight is not only our fight. Like it's like moral obligation of powerful democratic countries to help those who dying or sacrificing their freedom for the values that your countries are based on.
When we're looking at the world of political dynamics between Russia and Belarus, and we're looking at Lukashenko and we're looking at Putin, would you consider this sort of relationship between the two as Lukashenko's weakness or his strength?
You know, for many years, Lukashenko played a role of seesaw. You know, in winters he made friendship with Putin because of cheap gas and oil. You know, in summer he needed some money. You know, he turned to Europe. But now he's like he's treated as a puppet of Putin. You know, a lapdog, because he can't make any like personal decisions in Belarus, maybe except repressions. You know, because Lukashenko will provide our territories freely to Putin if they need it again to attack Ukraine. We see the process of Russification in Belarus, so we call it creeping occupation. Lukashenko selling the country to Russia, just in exchange for political and economic support of Putin. So, and you know, this Lukashenko is the most pro-Russian person, you know, in Belarus. He's like ready to sacrifice our sovereignty, our independence, but just to stay in power. But of course, their friendship is symbiotic. You know, they need each other. Putin also needs Lukashenko as a very cheap partner for just to have this huge territory. You know, to have. And
he seems easy to maneuver as well.
Absolutely. You know, but again, as returning to Assad's situation, they can betray each other at any moment. It's not friendship. You know, it's a situational relationship.
It's as long as you're useful, as long as you can give
Absolutely.
something to me, I'll be happy to help you. Your work for Belarus is incredibly admirable. You spoke about believing in democracy for Belarus. What is your vision for democratic Belarus, and how do you see the transition from a dictatorship to a democratic country, and what could be the possible challenges there?
You know, transition from a dictatorship to democracy is not an easy path, and it might take time. But we already now preparing for this moment of changing power in Belarus for democratic transition. We are preparing new laws. We are preparing new constitution. Just for this transition period was the first one was very, very fast. But of course, as I tell to Belarusians, don't think that when new free and fair elections will take place and the person will come to presidency that you will choose, that, you know, we will live happily. Of course not. You know, it will be difficulties, economic difficulties. We will have go through the process of reconciliation because too many crimes have been committed, you know, during these 4 years after fraudulent elections. But I'm sure that we will manage as a nation, and I'm absolutely sure that our democratic partners who are supporting us now, they will come to help us in this, you know, better period of our time. I'm sure that, you know, Belarusian nation is very friendly, is very disciplined, you know, hardworking. So we will attract new investment, you know, to Belarus. I'm sure that we will be ready to cut our dependency on Russia that was built by Lukashenko, you know, for these 30 years. We will give more opportunities to private businesses for them to develop.
And there will be a world
country.
of opportunity as well, opening up to Belarusian people, to Belarusian businesses, the economy in general.
Absolutely. Of course, economy is essential. And I think that, you know, these 30 years, Lukashenko always dragged us, you know, in Russia, closing possibilities for economic perspectives in Europe, and give this, you know, possibility to people themselves, to businesses. They will do everything, you know, necessary. Lukashenko is very old-fashioned in this economic approach, but our society moved forward, and he was left in
He was
in
left
history.
behind.
Yeah.
Donald Trump, the 47th president of the United States, the president-elect, is coming into office in only but a few days' time. So far, have you had a chance of contacting his future administration to talk about the Belarusian cause? What would be your message for Donald Trump?
First of all, I have to say that, you know, for these 4 years of our fight, we have been enjoying bipartisan support in American Parliament. It's very important and essential, and in 2020, when our uprising took place, it was Trump who was in power in the USA, and the first sanctions were imposed by Trump administration. So I think that they remember the process of strengthening of nation and defeat of Lukashenko. But now, of course, we had already first contacts with the new administration of Trump. But I think that time passed, and we have to rediscover Belarus for President Trump, but we have to discover it in a new position, because President Trump is more geopolitical, and now we have to explain how Belarus is strategically important for peace and security in the region, not a separate country, through security issues, we contribute to democratic values. We have to explain how Belarus and Ukraine are intertwined, that we are fighting, the same enemy, that without independent, reliable Belarus, there will be constant threat to Ukraine, to Poland, to Lithuania, our neighbors, because with Lukashenko, who is conducted, by Putin, there will be constant provocations on the borders, migration crisis, deployment of nuclear weapon, Shaheds over Belarus. So we can't solve this crisis in our region without democratizing Belarus. So that's why it's so essential, to pressure Lukashenko's regime and help democratic forces to win this fight.
Last but not least, I know that you have an incredibly busy schedule here in Poland. We're very lucky to have you here in the studio. And Poland is currently holding the rotating presidency in the EU. We know that you've met with the Polish Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, and other high-ranking Polish officials. What are you expecting from Poland? What are the talks about that you're holding with the Polish government now that Poland is actually holding that presidency?
If you talk about Polish EU presidency, concretely, this time motto of this presidency is security and solidarity. This is what is necessary for Belarus as well. And I see that Belarus is one of the priorities of Poland during its presidency, because together with Minister Sikorsky, we are going to have Kostyuszka's conference, to raise the topic of Belarus, and there will be plenty of events, where Belarusians will be participating, and it's actually a blessing for Belarus and Ukraine. I'm sure that now it's a Polish presidency, because we need Polish leadership in Europe for their strong position, for their consistent policy, for their support to Ukraine, for their support to Belarusian democratic forces, because, I think this memory of Polish nation, how much they have to sacrifice, to gain this freedom, and they feel
we have a common theme in our history. The struggle for independence, for freedom, for democracy.
Absolutely, and we as movement, we of course inspired by Solidarność movement, and there are so many good examples in Poland that we can bring, in future Belarus. But I'm so grateful for the support, for assistance of Polish side, and of course there is no necessity to explain to Polish government, parliament and people actually why it's necessary to help Belarusians and the Ukrainians. We really want to become reliable neighbors for you in the future, and I think that the Polish government also share our vision that the place of Belarus is in the European Union, that we are part of European family of countries, and during EU presidency we also have to highlight, future returning of Belarus into this welcoming family of countries.
Thank you so much, Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, the leader of the Belarusian opposition in exile. Pleasure to have you, and thank you for your time.
Dziękuję bardzo.
And so this would be all for now, but please do stay tuned here on TVP World, as we're back in just a moment with more news and features.